Introduce yourself, please.
I, Daniel Vladimirovich Alferov, am a lieutenant in the armed forces of the Russian Federation. I myself surrendered through the I Want to Live program.
Do you give your consent to the recording and publication of this conversation?
Of course, I give my consent.
That's good. We're going to have an unconventional conversation, but a very interesting one. Chances are you've seen the press conference, but it's without details. We'll talk in more detail in our format with more details. We've been in touch with your mother. Does she know where you are?
Not yet.
Not yet.
She was probably told I was a deserter.
Are you a deserter?
In the opinion of my command, yes.
Tell me about yourself. How old are you? What did you graduate from? How did you graduate? What will you do next?
I am 27 years old. I was born in Irkutsk. I have lived most of my life in Irkutsk and the Far East. I entered the Suvorov School, studied there for 5 years. Before the Ussuriysk Suvorov Military School, I practiced swimming, Greco-Roman wrestling, studied English and German. Since my mother believed that she could not give me a male upbringing, and agreeing with her, I entered the Ussuriysk Suvorov Military School. After graduating from the school, I entered the Moscow Higher Combined Arms Command School in Moscow.
What year did you enroll?
I entered in the 14th year.
Are you done?
In the winter of 18th.
4 years of school?
First we studied for 5 years, then the terms were shortened for some unknown reason, and so after 4.5 years I graduated in winter instead of summer, and not on Red Square, but in Alexander Garden.
Where were you assigned after graduation?
After graduating from the institute, I went to Dagestan, to the city of Baynaksk, to the 136th Motorized Rifle Brigade. I got to the position of commander of a shock motorized rifle platoon of a shock motorized rifle company.
Tell me, how long did you serve in Dagestan?
I served for about 1.5 years.
Tell me, a young officer comes in, a lieutenant. How do they greet you in Dagestan? How was military service? That's interesting. No one's ever told you that.
I'll tell you how I studied. Our training was as follows. In the first year, a cadet enrolls in MOS VOC training.
MOS VOC is it?
Moscow Combined Arms.
Acronym.
Yes, the first year was relatively hard because it's almost like line service. We were trained, the basics of military service and so on. Also, there were a large number of civilian subjects, and they were taught in a very compressed way. One math professor said we're all geniuses because we pass higher math in a year. That's right.
Why is there math in the army?
Yes, the artillerymen will calculate everything. Many civilian and military subjects were not taught very intensely. With the exception of only UW and BP, it's weapons design and their combat use. 2 subjects that were very well taught. Also, I'd like to mention RKHBZ. This is radiochemical biological defense and engineering training, but in general the training was not as serious as in other universities. Although our instructors liked to compare our school to West Point, which was funny even to us cadets.
Why West Point?
U.S.
But what's the point of this comparison?
Because there's West Point in Washington, D.C., and as professors and faculty told us, we rival them in elitism.
Really?
Recently, for the centennial of our school, a movie came out about how the training is done. In fact, about 60% of what was shown about the training program was missing.
Showing slides that everything is perfect?
They recorded a special video of us practicing on super modern simulators, just state-of-the-art equipment, practicing swimming with weapons.
Yes?
In reality, the machinery is old, the layouts are old. For example, only a few people knew how to maintain machinery, and that was because they were interested in it, and the rest did not know it. Tactical training with these state-of-the-art simulators has not been conducted with us. And we saw the swimming pool only when it was opened, but only our general and the head of the school swam there. That's it.
Was there a bathhouse?
There was, but
For a general?
it's probably true. After completing our freshman year, we were contracted for the duration of our training and for 5 years after graduation. That is, I had to serve in the army for another 5 years after graduation, no matter what the term was. In the event of termination before the contractual deadline, I will pay the tuition money.
Second, third, and fourth year, how did you do?
Our eyes were open to how things really are, although they assured us that the army is in order now compared to what it was before. After signing the contract, there was nowhere to go, and as we went on, we realized more and more what, shall we say, cesspool we could fall into.
What was wrong, compared to what was being told?
Let's say that initially we were told that civilian organizations were in charge of repairing equipment. It was said that all you would have to do was make a request and the equipment would be fixed, and the old equipment would be replaced with new, like in parades and so on. They said that the soldiers were better because they were contractors and knew everything there. In general, praise the army that everywhere order and everything according to the statute.
I'm going to communicate with him in a slightly non-standardized way. Those who didn't see the press conference, who aren't familiar with GUR special operations, will probably be curious as to why I'm communicating in such a complimentary or friendly manner. This is going to be a very interesting conversation. What did you major in?
Managing general military units as well as special units, I could move from the Ministry of Defense to the FSB, FSO, police, and even the Navy.
Did you decide where you were going?
No, I never fawned over my superiors, but I wasn't a rebel either. I did what was required of me and I was assigned to Dagestan, which was considered the worst place to serve.
You went there alone?
There were a lot of people from the battalion and a couple guys from my company. We graduated on December 15th.
2 weeks before New Year's Eve.
Yes.
When you got there, what was it like? What was the temperature?
The move was long because VPD was issued for the train.
VPD?
It's a bus pass.
I see.
Yeah, it's so I don't have to buy a ticket with my own money to move.
How long did you drive?
2 days, from Moscow.
If you were on an airplane?
5 hours tops, even 2.
How was your welcome there?
Initially, I didn't know where I was going. A classmate I went to school with used to tell me that it was a real neat grinder there. He served there on active duty. Said there was carnage, officers, police officers being blown up, and I drove with some apprehension. Because there, before I arrived, there was a status of counter-terrorist operation. This is so that law enforcers have the right to conduct searches and other activities without the consent of the court.
Is it still like that?
It's still happening now. But I mean, it was scary to go there.
Have you arrived at the unit?
No, I first came to Makhachkala to the train station. When I arrived, I didn't know, I thought I would take BTR, as I was told.
And nobody met me, so I called with the head of the formation unit to supervise my way.
I explained to the unit chief that I would wait for my comrade, as he was arriving a day late, and we would go to the unit together. I asked to be met, as I was wary of taking a cab, not knowing how Russians, especially servicemen, were treated.
Were you in uniform?
I arrived in civilian clothes, but I had my military uniform, parade uniform, and a bunch of other stuff with me, like I was moving. I asked for someone from the unit to come and pick us up.
When did you arrive at the unit?
Got to the unit, and the unit commander resented me for being too cocky a lieutenant to get his commander to allocate funds to bring me in.
And you?
I explained that it was very dangerous here, as I had been told, and decided to keep myself safe.
How was the reception?
In fact, there is a ritual there. A young lieutenant must come in dress uniform, introduce himself to the unit commander, report in uniform that so-and-so, a graduate of such and such school, has arrived for further service. I arrived there in civilian clothes. They didn't even make me change. I came to my unit, they took some of my data. And no one introduced me to the commander of the military unit. The ritual has been broken.
No one cared.
Nobody cares, and the further I served there, the more discoveries I made. I was wearing rose-colored glasses. In reality, there was no order in the combat unit. The further I served, the more I was shocked at what was happening there.
Is that a big part of it?
A fairly large, separate motorized rifle brigade, there were rocket divisions, artillery, self-propelled acacia howitzers and mortars were in every unit, etc.
How many men in the unit, roughly?
Probably over 1,000.
Most of it. Who were you there?
When I arrived, I tried to get into the drone strike company. I didn't want an adventure there. From the word of co-workers there, it's the best unit to do quiet service in, but there were no places available. I tried to get into the tank school, but not the infantry, because it was a mess. They told us about it at school, but in the end I ended up in the worst battalion. Motorized rifle.
The worst?
Because there is a constant turnover, the chief of staff and the combatant themselves contributed to this, although they themselves did not realize it. There were always incidents of guard duty there. When I came in, I only had 12 men in my platoon out of the 27 assigned.
What about the others?
They can't.
No contract workers?
Yes.
The others?
There were 2 motorized rifle battalions with contract soldiers and 1 battalion of conscripts. Conscripts could not be transferred to the contract battalion
What do you mean there aren't enough people? It's conscription.
because conscripts could not serve in contract battalions, and there were not enough contractors. No one wanted to go there to serve. Because at the time there were casualties and so on.
What year was that? The 19th.
That was before, but the fame has spread about this part. It was even earlier than the 14th year, when there was active fighting with the Wahhabis, who committed terrorist acts. When my friend served, all the contract workers were Russian, and when I arrived all the contract workers were locals.
Dagestani?
Yes, Dagestani Avars, Agals, Lesgians and so on.
You don't know these languages?
Of course not. The international language in Dagestan is Lesgin.
Yes. How do you manage people who can berate you in another language and you won't even know it?
In principle, I understand the psychology of people. If they say something bad, it will be immediately obvious by their eyes. Yes, I'm a young lieutenant, but I know what I need to do for this, especially there they immediately explained that their service is all for money. I could easily deprive them of 10,000 rubles in bonuses without repercussions. That alone motivated them to serve and follow orders. Sure, there were some good people there, but by and large everyone served for money.
For money. You're like a contract worker, you come in the morning and go out at night? Yeah. They do nothing and get 30 grand, right?
Yes, 30,000, someone else got more than me, about 70,000. What's your salary? When I came in I had a 3rd class, then I moved up to 2nd class, totaling about 70 to 80,000.
You rented a place?
No, when I arrived, they put us up in a hotel. The whole floor was empty and there were also officers or contract workers living there who were able to make arrangements. 5 people lived in our room, and 2 people lived in the other rooms, so it was a dormitory.
For you?
Yes, for the officers.
You lived in a room with 5 other people?
For more besides me.
You didn't rent an apartment in the city?
When it was safe to rent with my own money, I wrote a report to be allocated a certain amount so that I would not have to pay rent. I stood on principle to be allocated that money and lived there myself.
How much does it cost to rent?
15,000 on average.
It's pennies.
I know.
Why suffer when you get 70,000? You could have given 15,000 and lived on your own.
Based on safety, because it was on the unit's property after all, and plus it was closer to the center of town. If you rent in the city center, prices start from 20,000 and up, and on the outskirts of 15.
You're talking about safety. Is it dangerous for a Russian in uniform to walk around town?
Yes, I think so, because when they were briefing me, they said it was better to walk around in civilian clothes. There are fewer claims and precedents for committing some atrocity against officers.
Did you?
Not on my watch.
Didn't the officers walk around town in uniform?
We didn't go because the soldiers were all local and the officers were Russian, so we were told that it was better in civilian clothes.
Why did you leave the army? And how did you leave?
For the first month or 2 we weren't touched. It's called a lieutenant's month. So that we would not be frightened, we were not assigned anywhere, we were communicated with rather gently. We just had to accept the equipment, weapons, and property assigned to the plant. And we ran some small errands. It was an easy start, nothing complicated. During the lieutenant's term, something went wrong. There are so-called lieutenant training camps. I was very sick at a local cafe, so much so that I had to have an 4 put in. I had a fever. It was just about time for the training camp. We had to go to Vladikavkaz. I was very sick, but they discharged me from the hospital and told me I had to go or they would get a bad grade because of me. I was sick, but I was motivated by the fact that I had to defend the honor of the unit, promised that they would give me a rest, but in the end it did not happen. Overall, I was motivated to serve at that time, and all adversities and difficulties I was willing to overcome, so I went. We drove back. After the lieutenant's term began to load gradually with tasks that were not appropriate for the position of platoon commander. It started out easy, paperwork, going in place of the company commander to a meeting, and so on. At first there was nothing to portend trouble, except that it was difficult to manage the contractors. They snapped.
Didn't listen?
They did not follow orders, they had to be persuaded. It was especially difficult to manage the personnel. My platoon was gradually recruiting people for vacant positions, but only 3, even 2 people were normal, who could be relied on. The rest were not very nice people. So 3 months went by like that. We had constant drills. 2 weeks a month we were in the fields. I understood that it was military service, and it was not morally difficult for me. The first unpleasant situation took place when an inspector from Moscow arrived, and I was the only one of the interviewees who could report my combat mission as required by the regulations. Roughly as follows: the 3rd Motorized Rifle Platoon is to move out on route number 3, fight UAVs while moving out, watch the flanks while moving out, and so on. I reported clearly and competently in military language. Whereupon the reviewer asked, "Is this the company commander?" The combat replied that I was a young lieutenant. Then he said, "Make him the company commander, because your company commander can't report anything, he's mumbling." Combat said that it was not necessary to put me, because young, inexperienced, makes mistakes, although I had none. I didn't realize that. The first medal I could have gotten on my record and gotten a promotion, but I wasn't given one, and I didn't understand why. I think I did the right thing.
And became an enemy of the people.
The company commander looked at me obliquely, saying, "What are you showing off? I didn't report and you should have kept quiet."
Next.
That was the first alarm bell, and then everything, all the deadlines passed, of which I was unaware, and the battalion command showed its true face. The battalion chief had his hands free, because the deadlines had passed, and he would get drunk on vodka, call us in and start beating us. Because we didn't accomplish some tasks.
Did the commander do this?
Chief of Staff
called
up young platoon commanders and started beating them up for failing to fulfill some documented tasks.
What nation is he?
Russian. He said this phrase, "You lieutenants are all brats." In my days, we used to wash lieutenants with conscripts to make them men, but you all start crying like women, and so on.
Beating up officers?
Not so much, spankings mostly.
Did someone snap at him?
One tried to snap at him, but he beat him to a pulp, broke his arm or something, but did it all quietly. I found this out when I went to the infirmary, and by chance I saw him there. He was lying there like he was hidden from everyone.
When did you quit?
I quit in the spring of 20.
Were you fired with or without problems because you said there was a contract?
Yes, with very big problems as the negativity piled up. You could go on for hours about what went on in that mess.
Tell me some of the toughest case of negativity.
I won't say that we weren't given any food or water at all back then.
How's that?
At the drill, we bought our own water and food. No funds were allocated for this. We paid for our own sustenance.
Where did everything disappear from the warehouse?
Never once saw what was in the warehouses. Even the raw warehouse, it was all leaking, it was in a very terrible condition, and all these problems were not being addressed. If the inspectors came, he was given a suitcase with money.
How much did it cost?
I heard from officers, they paid from $5,000, everything was counted in dollars there.
In dollars?
They paid not in rubles, but in dollars.
Bribes in dollars?
We paid in dollars to carry less cash.
Fewer bills?
Yes. I'll tell you more. A check came from Moscow, more precisely from the headquarters of the army, to which we were subordinate, to check the anti-terror. I had everything as ready as possible, as far as possible. But I still had to bribe with vodka.
Vodka?
Yeah, so I don't have any complaints.
For what?
I didn't have some sort of ladder that I wasn't given, ammunition was a little bit lacking, I was young, inexperienced. They told me they're going to send me to the carpet and fire me, and make me pay the money, so give it to me.
They were scaring you that they'd get you out of the army and you'd have to pay. How much would you owe?
A year of schooling cost $219,000.
220,000 for 4 years. That's 900,000.
About $1 million.
About $1 million. How much vodka did you give?
2 boxes for $16,000.
20th year?
It was the year 2019.
2019 year. Everything you need to know about Russia. A bribe to give 2 cases of vodka for 16,000 rubles so that there would be no problems. In this place put a like, subscribe, write comments. I keep forgetting about it, otherwise Igor together with Yulia and Olya will execute me later, and Zolkin too. 2 cases of vodka, but it's thrash. You took a bribe.
They got off my back. Then how I quit.
Was everyone drinking in there?
Yeah. Why I decided to quit in the first place was because I was under a lot of pressure. At first I thought that now I would accomplish the task and they would treat me normally, loyally, but it turned out to be the opposite. The more I took on the work, the more I became a whipping boy. My classmates, also officers, who came with me, started drinking. Personally for myself I will say that I do not drink in any way, no, I can drink of course, but to get drunk. I never do that, because I am in favor of a healthy lifestyle. There is such a thing as fitting in, when you drink a glass of vodka and say, I am so-and-so and so-and-so has arrived for service. We didn't want to go there, some of the young lieutenants.
Why?
Because combat has shown himself to be bad right from the start. They started getting drunk there, and I continued to socialize with officers from other units. Many had already been tried, or had lost the normal human appearance that befits an officer.
Did a lot of officers live in that dorm?
20 people, maybe.
It's not much.
But it's still a lot compared to having an entire floor of officers.
I understand there were Alco parties every night.
No, we had one unit up in the mountains, that's infantry, and we had other units down below. There were military police on the grounds of the unit, they could come and take it away. They drank somewhere in the city in restaurants, especially for Russians.
All right, say hello to those who are aware of Operation Bluetooth, write who I'm writing about now. These are our passwords with our subscribers. By the way, to answer your question, no contact with him. Spoke to my spouse today, no contact with him. You go ahead.
It turns out, my classmate lieutenants started drinking. Some officers who didn't drink started going on fishing trips and drinking. The only reason they didn't lose their minds there was because they drank all the time. The main thing was the apartments where they drank. Of course, there were a lot of adequate officers to talk to, but in general they had a very sad moral image.
Prospects of transferring from Dagestan?
I've tried. Applied for training as a Chinese translator.
Say something in Chinese.
Ni hao a jawada for hinjo de nai vas and moist their dosoan a white swayzabo.
Do you understand? I know Chinese too. I just hide it so I don't get caught.
I've been intimidated by many people's worldviews. I have been tried more than once to get dragged in for a drink together.
For company.
This is one side of the coin. All this negativity made me think, why do I need this army? They don't let me transfer. They don't let me go to serve. These personnel officers behaved brazenly. When people called from Moscow, they sent them away. They said, Lieutenant Alferov is so good that we won't let him go, but in reality,
Good lieutenant.
they were told that they would not let me go anywhere as a good officer because of the manpower shortage. It was almost impossible to transfer from Dagestan without powerful connections.
Is the unit staffed?
It was 70% staffed.
Was there a problem?
Yes, of course, I only had 2 platoon leaders in my company. By battalion, all companies were missing at least one officer. In any position.
Why? Not enough graduates? There was no active war.
When were this furniture maker's reforms? What was his last name?
Shoigu?
No, the previous Secretary of Defense. I forgot.
Now Google will tell you.
Due to his reforms, officers became scarce, many were dismissed, and because of this there was a personnel hunger strike.
Serdyukov.
Yes.
Defense Minister, furniture maker Serdyukov.
To put it in perspective, he had a very good idea. If everything was done right in Russia, there would be a relatively powerful army. But since everyone was stealing and didn't want to do what they were supposed to do, things turned out very sadly.
In the end, how did you quit?
I didn't know how to quit. I contacted military lawyers and they explained to me how it could be done. It was necessary to open a sole proprietorship, make purchases, but for 100% result, to make purchases up to 10,000, after that can be dismissed as unreliable. It's not a criminal offense, just that I would have been fired for non-compliance with the terms of my contract.
There's a rule that an officer can't do that.
Military. Yes, to have a supplemental income.
The scheme is that you register yourself as a sole trader.
Yes.
You buy some merchandise, you simulate some activity.
Yes.
The unit accidentally finds out about it and they fire you because you're doing another activity.
That's right.
Did you get it?
No.
Was it all for nothing?
Yeah. It's gotten worse because there's lawlessness going on, no one to complain to.
In Dagestan?
Yes.
In the whole army?
Because of the harsher treatment in Dagestan. I'll tell you everything now, and everything will become clear. The first boiling point came when the inventory check arrived. It happens once every 5 years. The company commander safely in advance went on a business trip to shoot some movie. I don't know who he paid the money to. I went through this inventory as a company commander, but according to the documents, I am just a senior officer. I was appointed because I was the only adequate officer in the company. The company didn't have a delivery on GSM, so they didn't write off the invoices. GSM, a bunch of lost wounders in the set, either not enough or the set itself was not there, furniture. There were no BMP-3 in the unit, one was written off. BMP-2 was on the balance of the battalion and company.
He wasn't there, and he wasn't.
Next. Some tech numbers didn't add up, then the night sight that was assigned to me, turns out it wasn't assigned to me, it was assigned to another factory, and it turned out I didn't have night sights.
A lot of shortages were found.
For the whole company was a very decent amount of money, from 16 million rubles, which had to be reimbursed, also for the BMP a large amount.
Lost your BMP?
I was supposed to show it, but I didn't. The situation is as follows. They give me this paper with all the shortages and tell me to sign it. According to the results of the inventory, such a shortage was revealed. They handed me this paper to sign, and it said, Company Commander Lieutenant Alferov. I said, I'm not going to sign it, am I a fool or what? Here, there is a company commander, let's give the acts of reception, where the positions are specified, it will be shown there that it was not lost under me and I will then sign. The inspector said, okay, then the brigade from my battalion commander, chief of staff, came in and I was gently hinted that I would be finished if I didn't sign. I didn't know what to do when I had to sign. I realized it was the end, there was nowhere else to go. I realized that I would have been forced to accept the cases and the position retroactively.
Logical.
Then they'd pin a tidy sum on me.
16 million?
Over 16 million, that's a huge amount for Russia. The next day I did not come to the military unit. I waited for a week for the inspectors to leave. I don't know who they put this debt on. I didn't show up for that purpose. At first almost never left the garrison area, then I left and I hid in the city. 5 days later I arrived at the service where I was greeted very cheerfully, in quotes, and beaten.
Beaten?
Yes.
How long have you been in the service?
This is the 8th month or so.
I see.
And that's it.
Who did?
Combat, chief of staff, and some other officer I didn't even know.
Write in the comments, what do you think about it? If this is the attitude towards officers, what will be the attitude towards the mobilized? I'm not talking about convicts. If contract workers get beaten, then
There are Dagestanis there.
they're not being touched?
Yes.
No.
Only Russians and officers were beaten there.
Purely Russian and officers. When the locals were beaten, were there Russian soldiers?
There was one, and he converted to Islam.
Pressurized?
Of course, the locals first persuaded me under various pretexts that they had found me a beautiful wife. I just had to accept Islam.
Oh, did you?
Sure.
Did he convert to Islam?
He's an ordinary man, there was no rod in him. Therefore,
It's been written.
he was treated well, but after he converted to Islam, the Russians treated him as a traitor.
Как вообще даги относятся к русским?
It was mostly from the older generation, in their 30s, 40s, they were still adequate. Even those who were over 35 and older were more adequate, while those who were younger were uncontrollable, wild, wanting to prove something all the time. If I had chosen the wrong words, then I have abilities to psychology. I understand what I need to say, how I can say it. I will pick up the right words, and if he is wrong, I will prove him by all means. If you get in the way, they'll probably hit you on the spot or meet you behind a fence somewhere and beat you up.
Has it happened before?
Yes. Dagestanis.
Tough. What about them?
И что им было?
Nothing. It was all useless. If you scared them, they would go into the mountains and no one would find them then.
And in the city, how do the locals treat Russians?
Those who did business were treated normally.
Because full wallets.
Yes.
The others?
The auto mechanics were very poorly treated. They put such high-priced tags to get the car fixed. There are others too.
If you are Russian, the price tag will be more expensive for you?
Yes.
How's that?
The attitude is such because of the fact that there were some clashes there, where civilians suffered. Apparently, someone died, so there was a bad relationship for that reason. Nothing specific.
Russians are hated everywhere, and they will always be cheated out of money if they get the chance. That's it.
Обдерут на бабки. Ну, это вот...
This is an interesting conversation, because no one has ever told such a story. No one has ever told about a Dagestani serviceman who is a cadre officer. It is very important to understand that he is not a mobilized soldier, he is not a military officer. He is a cadre military man who studied at a military institute in Moscow. And here we see everything. I think that this attitude exists in Ossetia and everywhere else.
Yes. I was told that in Buryatia, during my service, in some remote area, Buryats who were locals, both officers and soldiers, were extorted for money.
местные буряты в какой-то там части, которая где-то там в глухой местности находится, ставили офицеров, там, солдат на счетчик.
Banditry was rampant there, just like in the 90s. They said they would guard the military, but for money.
Did the soldiers do it?
It was the locals. Extorting money. For example, you get money and pay them 30,000 from your 80,000. The wages of the locals were the same as in Dagestan. Then nobody would touch you and you would live peacefully.
And if you don't pay?
In that case, you'll be taken somewhere, maybe killed. This is information from a fellow student of mine from college.
How does he know that?
He said to me,
Is he in Buryatia?
he served in Buryatia.
Write this. Buryats demand money from Russian officers so that Russian officers will not have problems. Dagestanis can't be touched because they come and beat Russian officers. I don't swear because the critic asked me to. He is tired of the censorship of words.
Я не матюкаюсь, потому что критик просил. Он устает запикивать.
They beat you up after a week's layoff. What happened next?
Увольнение, что было дальше?
I wrote a couple of explanatory letters, but I don't remember exactly what they said about military service. I had already contacted lawyers after the situation about the inspection. There was a serviceman in our unit, already a senior lieutenant, who was also quitting. He explained to me how to proceed. He said that in order not to be prosecuted, you should not report for duty for up to 10 days, and at the same time you should somehow document that you served in the territory of this unit. For example, you filled out a diary, there is a book of daily summaries, you taught classes, gave grades, and so on. You had to document that you were performing your official duties. We talked. He said that everyone was very scared and my case was not the first. He showed me a videotape where many young lieutenants, smart and brave, were about to quit. One of them was luckier. His wife wrote down that her husband was not allowed out of the unit tour, although he should have such an opportunity. There were many such cases, I cannot mention them all.
Can they not let the officer through?
By order of the commander.
How's that?
Thus,
An officer works from 9 to 6, except when on duty.
that's all the official information. And unofficially, we had the service from 6 in the morning to wait for the commander until he came from a meeting. Then we would wait until 6 to 8 o'clock, then wait until 9 o'clock in the evening for inspection, and then, at best, leave the service at 11 o'clock. I'll tell you more. In the summer, I had a vacation, not a lieutenant's vacation, but a full-fledged vacation as an officer. When I returned, I was transferred to the position of battalion chief of staff. For the first 2 weeks, I would come in at 5 in the morning and leave at 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning. That was it.
How could you come at 5 o'clock in the morning?
If I had a couple of hours or an hour to sleep, I slept right in my office. When there was an opportunity to leave the battalion for a rest, I would definitely leave, even if I lost half an hour. Because I needed some kind of moral rest.
That was your vacation?
It was after my vacation. It turns out that the more you serve, the longer your vacation will be. I had the shortest leave among the newly arrived officers, so upon arrival I was put in charge of the battalion headquarters.
I got it. How'd you quit?
They opened a criminal case against me. I don't remember the number of the article, but it says that I evaded my official duties by forging medical documents or otherwise. It was under this article that I was prosecuted.
На меня завели уголовное дело.
I
Я
didn't know
не
what to
знал, что
do.
делать. Юристы
The
сказали,
lawyer
что
said that
вроде всё
everything would be
хорошо,
fine, but I didn't believe it, so I went to the
но мне
military
не поверилось,
prosecutor's
и я
office
в
and wrote
ответ
a
пошел в
statement.
прокуратуру.
From the point of view of officers' etiquette and honor, it was not nice to complain
Вообще
about
это
your
было с
fellow
точки
officers,
зрения
that you were beaten up
офицерского
and so on.
этикета, чести, некрасиво стучать на своих, что тебя бьют и так далее.
But in
Но это
reality,
всё
it was all
предрассудки,
prejudice.
и я пошел
I went to the military
в
prosecutor's
военную
office and
прокуратуру,
wrote everything as
написал
it
всё,
was,
как было,
that
что
I
меня
was
били,
beaten and my
избивали,
military honor and
унижали
dignity
моё
was humiliated, that there were overtime hours that were not paid, that I was released late.
не оплачивались, вызывали рано, отпускали поздно. Вот
I
всё,
didn't even
мне
have to
даже
lie,
знать не приходилось,
because everything that was true I just told.
сказал.
At that time, I was no longer on duty. I went on duty once a week as battalion duty officer, scanned my report, and took it to them. When I wrote a statement, I was summoned for questioning a couple of times. I brought all the documents proving that I performed my duties at least once every 10 days. And I did them once a week. And in general, there was nothing to criticize me for. In the end, the battalion commander, a representative of the military prosecutor's office, some major whose last name I don't remember, came to see me. They offered to close my criminal case. They said that nothing would happen to me, that I would withdraw my testimony and everything would be fine, no one would touch me, and I would resign under the article on non-compliance with the terms of the contract.
My understanding is that when the prosecutor's office prosecuted the case, the prosecutors and military started bothering the unit command.
Yes.
Then the commanders came and brought 10 cases of vodka, because they realized that there would be an inspection from the prosecutor's office, and this is a big problem for the unit, a problem for the commander. They brought 5 rams, 10 cases of vodka, and there was a behind-the-scenes arrangement. They offered dismissal if he took back his application. The prosecutors accepted 15 rams and 30 cases of vodka, and they settled on that. That's the story. Did they fire you quickly?
I waited about 4 months to be fired.
Payment?
They paid my wages as they should. They were so bad at paperwork that they couldn't fire me right away. They reprimanded me once and I got 3,000 less, but the rest of the time I got the amounts as if I had done my job completely.
You were in the unit for 4 months?
Yeah, that's where the military police are.
Where?
Yes, at the bottom.
But you didn't do anything?
I went out once a week for service.
I got it. When did you quit?
I quit my job around March.
That was in March of the year 2020. This is where the trimming will take place. We had a pause, a smoke break. How did your mother feel about your decision to retire from the military?
When I arrived, I was on paid leave, which was required by law. She didn't know at first, and at the end of the leave, I told my mother that I was no longer in the military and so on. I asked her not to yell at me and to understand my decision so as not to throw tantrums. And we never brought up the subject of my leaving the army again. The only thing we talked about was what I would do next and so on. Since I had many desires and had experienced a relatively difficult stage in my life, I didn't know what to do. All the doors were open to me again, and I had to choose what to do next. At that time, I did not know that because my department had poor paperwork, I would not even have to pay compensation to the state for dismissal, etc. It came as a surprise to me that 3 months later they filed a lawsuit in court to collect the debt from me.
They couldn't sue you because of the article you were fired for.
Тебя уволили по какой статье?
I was fired due to non-compliance with the terms of the contract on my part.
С моей стороны.
They should have sued and they would have won.
Подать, и они бы выиграли.
Да,
Yeah.
они бы выиграли вообще без
They would
проблем.
have won no
Даже
problem,
смогли
but they
сделать.
couldn't even do that.
Подает войсковая
It's
часть.
the military unit that's suing.
I see.
Понял?
И
So I
поэтому,
left and
а,
waited for my
я
ID to be
приехал в
issued.
Гражданку, дождался, когда мне дадут,
Where did you go?
Да?
The city of Shelkovo in the Moscow region. I was waiting to be issued a reserve officer's ticket, and to keep my time, I took a radio broadcasting course.
И чтобы не терять времени, я пошел на курсы радиоведущего.
Radio host.
Да,
Yes.
чтобы,
I felt psychologically stressed for some reason, plus I had a nervous tic that I didn't know I had at the time. I had a slight tremor because of the stress, and my right hand was twitching a little bit.
У меня, получается, от нервов, как мне казалось, идет какая-то дрожь, и я чуть-чуть подергивал правой рукой.
I felt like I had goosebumps running down my back, like I was cold.
Мне, типа, прохладно.
Then I found out it
Потом
was a
я узнал,
nervous
что у меня,
tic.
оказывается, был нервный тик.
I cured it on my own.
По итогу вылечил без проблем самостоятельно.
I
То есть я
recognized the
осознал
problem,
проблему,
started to
начал
control myself,
контролировать,
and from that point on,
даже
even in a
в
stressful
стрессовой
situation, I didn't have the
я
involuntary nervous tic that I had before.
произвольного, который у меня был
I came to terms with
я
it.
справился.
For about 3 months, I took a radio broadcasting course. I got my diploma. I have a picture of me with this diploma on Instagram. There I learned acting, how to conduct interviews, how to broadcast, what kind of programs are needed to make it interesting and exciting.
Мастерства, как проводить интервью, как вести радиовещание, какие программы нужно. Ну, то есть все вот это, что было и интересно, и увлекательно.
I met new
Познакомился с новыми
people.
людьми.
They were all shocked that a military man quit his job and came to study to be a radio host.
Радиоведущий, я такой
I
первый.
was the first.
Did you work there?
Работал ведущим?
Да,
Yeah.
там, получается, было типа
I was an
служба,
intern there for about a month.
платили очень мало, там,
They paid very little, 15,000 a month, even less.
Стажировка.
да,
I
я
was
всё
only
время
there
там
for 3 weeks.
стажировался.
And then I decided on a line of work for myself.
Я дальше занимался тем, что определил для себя направление.
Since I love Japanese culture and have a penchant for languages, and this was noticed by everyone around me, even in the military unit.
Получается,
When I was
самое
discharged from the
первое,
military,
военным,
I planned that I would study Chinese.
И я решил, что изначально я в части еще планировал, когда увольнялся, буду изучать китайский.
I was already against my state, its true nature.
Поскольку я уже тогда
But there was nothing I could do about it, and in China it was about the same story, and it was unclear where the political system would turn and what would happen there in the future, so I decided to choose the Japanese direction.
завернет русло их строя политического и так далее, что там будет в дальнейшем. Я решил для себя выбрать японское направление именно.
Japanese culture is quite interesting. They have a beautiful language, because it is said that Japanese is like French only Asian, very beautiful.
Язык, только
In addition, I have been greatly influenced by mass culture.
ну плюс масс-культура на меня повлияла.
I started watching Japanese anime.
Ну и в целом,
I listened to Japanese music in general, and I really liked it.
ну, мне она мне очень понравилась.
Plus, I liked their
Плюс
traditions,
традиции мне
holidays, and so on.
праздники
In
и
general,
так далее.
I decided for myself that I would save up money for my studies, move to Japan, and live there.
В Японию и буду там жить.
We're back to the topic of how you were mobilized.
Тебя мобнули?
Unexpectedly, I received a paper summoning me for questioning at the military enlistment office. Usually it comes in this form if I have not done compulsory military service and I have been evading military service for a very long time.
Службу и очень долго ухожу от, получается, от военной службы.
It was completely absurd, because it was after mobilization had taken place. They also came for me, but I was not at my place of residence. On the very last day, my mom called me and told me that they came when I wasn't home, so I got lucky with that. According to this paper, I had to give some kind of testimony, but exactly what kind it is not clear. I just had to come to the interrogation. If I hadn't come, the police would have come for me by now.
And you came?
Того ты пришел.
Of course, I didn't want any problems.
Проблемы, тем более,
Moreover,
когда
the
мы-
training, or rather the active recruitment phase, was already over.
ну, точнее, не курс, а вот
I thought that
активная
everything
фаза
would be
тренировки
fine.
была. Я в целом думал, что все нормально будет.
When I
Естественно,
arrived, I was met by the
меня
commissar
встретил
for the town of
комиссар,
Shkayolkovo and a member of the special department. I do not know his name and surname.
Who was the other one?
Особист это
A member of the special department is an FSB officer who was attached to the military enlistment office.
Ну, они меня типа радушно
They welcomed
встретили.
me a little friendly, and they started asking me why I had not been mobilized.
Как-
I answered that I had not received any notification.
Так и сяк, ко мне не пришла бумага.
And when they came to pick me up, I was not at my place of registration.
Где ты был? Ну,
Then they started asking questions about where I was at that moment. I was not asked how I felt about the whole situation, they only asked me, "Are you in favor of Russia or not?" I said that I was in favor of everything being fine,
То, чтобы всё было хорошо, и
and
чтобы
I
было
was saying that I was against the war.
отвечать очень мягко, но в
I
целом
tried to
показывал,
answer very gently and showed that I was definitely not in favor of war.
как это было возможно.
Then they
Или
started
как
playing the game good cop and bad cop.
ну, плохо и хорошо там относиться, типа хороший полицейский, плохой полицейский.
The commissioner said that the motherland was in danger and needed to be protected. There are many Bandera supporters and NATO representatives in Ukraine, and Russia has never faced such threats. And the FSB officer asked why I didn't come to the military registration and enlistment office myself. Maybe I'm a traitor? One convinced, the other intimidated.
Yes.
And then,
How scared he was. What if you refuse?
he told me that he would interrogate me and check my entire past life, look for my old problems. I had something to hide. I was subscribed to opposition channels. If they looked at my Google metrics, they would get the impression that I am not a patriot.
Yes.
And finally, they found something to intimidate me with. I have a brother, and he is currently studying at the institute. They said, what if he is accidentally expelled and goes to serve in the army? What if he signs a military contract? What if something happens to him? He doesn't know how to fight, and you are a professional military man. Let's do it this way. We won't touch your brother, and you will go to war, that is, to a special military operation. I pretended that this was a good deal, passed the medical examination, and wrote a report saying that I wanted to sign a military contract. This was all on the same day, then the most difficult thing began for me. But literally a week and a half later, the Ukrainian Special Services contacted me.
Was this in June?
в июне месяце.
This was in May,
Yep, in May.
just after my birthday. It was as if they waited on purpose. It was in the 20s.
What did they tell you?
Что, что тебе говорили?
When they contacted me, at first I didn't understand who it was. It seemed to me that the FSB officers were checking me. I won't tell you the exact text, because I don't remember it word for word, but that's the gist of it. Some stranger contacted me and first just started getting to know me and then gaining confidence in me.
Просто сначала знакомиться, а потом начал входить ко мне в доверие.
I was just wondering. In fact, I was lucky because in the end it saved my life. He asked general questions. Do you know someone like that? These are our mutual friends. At first, there was operational work. They trusted me, but I understood that something was fishy here. But I stayed in touch since I didn't say anything special. Like this. The more we talked, the more I realized that it was not the FSB, but someone else. I didn't understand who it was. But then, the day I came to sign the military contract, I signed the contract on June 5th. They explained to me who they were, for what purpose, and how they contacted me, and how they did it. I was surprised how well they worked, because I doubt that our FSB officers could recruit anyone on the territory of Ukraine like that. I believe that their methods of intimidation or bribery are more developed than cool operational work. They explained to me that they roughly know who I am, what I do, and understand my situation. I was surprised how professional everything looked. They told me a little information about me, where I served and so on. That is, my biography in brief. And that they understand that I am an interesting candidate to work with them. I'll explain my position right away. From the beginning of a full-scale war until the moment when I was forced to sign a contract, I considered myself to be in the opposition camp. I was more often interested in our politics. I looked at what was happening in Bucha and so on. I argued with my parents that this was a war, not a special military operation, that we were wrong. I didn't argue with my military friends, because I understood that if I started, they would have problems. We immediately figured out who was on which side, so I stopped communicating with them. I didn't know what to do, but when I was contacted, I saw a ray of hope. I watched an interview on Vladimir Zolkin's channel. I saw our oppositionists. They told stories.
How many videos have you watched?
More than 20, that's for sure. I watched a lot of interviews. I even saw those that did not relate to prisoners of war. I watched an interview regarding the arrangement of a prisoner of war camp, how the convention was observed, and so on. I watched a lot of videos on your channel.
We had a record holder who watched more than 50 videos.
At first it was interesting, because there were different stories, and then everything went like a carbon copy. The fact that many were captured, but the stories were approximately the same. I just looked through it and realized that the story was about the same. I liked it and minimized the video.
Are you like the one who watched the interview and the one who fought? Those people who told stories, did they lie?
Not at all. Some of them were lucky. Some were unlucky, but in fact, everything was as they described. The situation turned out as follows. When about 3 weeks had already passed, my people from the platoon and company began to refuse. The soldiers agreed among themselves that when people from headquarters arrived, the soldiers would begin to refuse. And only when there are good conditions, good communications, evacuation of the wounded, and so on, only then will they go to these islands. Because we moved to the islands as special forces, through swamps and rivers. We used to go for 3 days, then for a week or more. It's mentally difficult, plus there's no food, and so on. As a result, when they agreed, the platoon told me that everyone wanted. That everyone wants to give up. I thought it was a good idea and decided against it too. The situation is as follows. At night, at about 10 o'clock, the chief and the new company commander arrived from headquarters. Recently, a regular company commander was wounded and taken to the hospital. They first came to my position because it was not far from the landing zone. They asked, "Will you take the position?" I replied that I would not go. Why? I told them the reasons that I had previously voiced. I was told to choose either the Storm Z unit or the position. I said, okay, I'm going to Storm Z. They signed me up and went through my positions. In the first position, everything was as agreed. And at my second position, one of the servicemen said that I persuaded the entire company to abandon these islands. As if I came and told them to refuse, as if I told them to say exactly that. And they decided that I decided to start sabotage. After which they no longer came back to me, a special group came for me. We called it Combat's Retinue. Because the battalion commander, even when we were in Crimea, said the following phrase, I can only rely on those who are in prison and on those who fought before. And in Crimea, he demonstratively handed over officer pistols as a sign of loyalty.
Who did he give them to? Private?
Yes, 4 ordinary soldiers.
Now, in fact, a very sad story is happening in their army, which, of course, makes us all happy. Prigozhin and his prisoners turned the army into a regular gang. This is literally a gang. They have lost the concepts of officer and sergeant. The prison world has mixed with the military. Prisoners say that the military has adopted many habits from the thieves' world. Today, the armed forces of the Ministry of the Russian Federation are a gang where the main one is
Anarchy.
Anarchy and thieves' laws. I've been to press conferences. Please tell us who is a member of the retinue and what was allowed to them at that time?
The battalion commander chose the best people, about 20 people who had been in prison or had fought before. They could have been called up, not from a specific unit, but from completely different units. They were trained to carry out punitive operations and restore order in very cruel ways, torture, mockery, and so on. For example, I will tell you what awaited me there and what I had to go through. At first they lied about how they were fighting in the Zaporozhye direction and killing Ukrainians, of whom there were almost none left. What kind of Ukrainians are Polish mercenaries, as well as soldiers from other countries, fighting for? That soon they will run out of army, the entire young generation has already been killed, and we will again destroy them all very easily. No difficulties. Our side is having temporary difficulties, but you are holding on. That's what they said when they first came. Later, they secretly removed those who were guilty. They threw people into pits, and so on. In general, they were engaged in punitive operations, which I learned about later, directly from first-hand experience. They told me what they did with these soldiers. As for me, they came for me. They knew the following information about me. They knew that I was a career officer and could shoot, and so on. About 8 people came for me, maybe even more. These were people led by an officer from the retinue. They came to take me for questioning to the commander. But I knew what all this meant. I couldn't run because there was a swamp in front of us. I left all the weapons in position, and later I took 2 painkillers, ibuprofen. Since I knew that, most likely, they would beat me, but until the end I still had no idea what lay ahead of me. They asked my rank, what company I served in, what it was called. I don't want to remember these moments anymore. They humiliated my honor and my dignity. After we went to the evacuation zone, that is, the landing zone, from where a car was supposed to pick me up, they beat me with machine guns, kicked me and said that they would kill and stab me. This was the beginning of my torture. Then a car arrived. When we got to the battalion headquarters, they carried me to the commander and took me to his bunker, that is, dugout. There the commander destroyed me morally. He said that I was not an officer, but a saboteur, and threatened to write to everyone what a traitor and nonentity I was. The essence of his words was that I raised sabotage. I am a traitor to the motherland, they will kill me, or better yet, rape me. And they also promised me the following event: they would first feed me morphine and discredit me, tell me I was a drug addict, and take me to the military police. There I was to be dishonored with some unknown object. I guess that they could do it with a rubber truncheon, after which they would parade me around the positions so that officers and battalion or company commanders would do the same to me. Then they said they would throw me in a pit for 5 days, after which they promised that I would go as a soldier in Storm Z to storm the Antonov Bridge. And that's where you die. That's if you leave out all the profanity. If it had gone on longer, I would have been morally broken, because morally it is very hard when you are facing death. But, I will say this, I have always had my own point of view, from college and the military to this day. I've always stood up for what's right, and I've gotten in a lot of trouble for it. Among the military, and even among this entourage, I have always been honored and respected. Eventually, one of his deputies stepped in for me, as I was helping to train the soldiers. When there were preparatory classes, I trained the soldiers and explained to them how general combat is conducted, what they are facing and how they can hide from mortars and drones. I explained to them how to act. I also taught them how to command without words, and in general it is a very difficult job. As a military educator, I explained everything to them in a competent, clear, and understandable way. Until they understood everything. Among all the officers who were in that position, I was the most experienced, because the others were either liaison officers or they had nothing to do with the army, namely the infantry. When there were different jobs, I would go with the soldiers, gain my authority, because I realized that in the end, if I was closer to them, they would be more predisposed to talk to me, they would be able to talk to me, and in the end, that's what saved me. They realized I wasn't rioting and thought it was someone else. I was forgiven. I was told to go to the islands and lead the group, reassembling the volunteers. When I was tortured, the officers frightened all the soldiers, and immediately there were volunteers who were ready to storm and go to the islands. They realized that if an officer was taken away, they would definitely be taken away. No one knew the officer who had been tortured for 4 days. I met him on the islands the last time I was there. He told me what had really happened to him. He didn't want to leave these islands. He said it was peaceful here, the authorities would not get to me, I'd rather stay here. Let them bring me food, and I will wash in the river.
He didn't want to leave the island so he wouldn't get there?
Yes. Yes. In the end, he had to go because 3 officers in my group came in. 1 officer from the platoon volunteered, and a sapper also came. We were supposed to get a soldier, but the sapper had the right knowledge, so he came with us. We were given a sapper officer to perform demoning tasks, even though his tasks were to be performed by an ordinary soldier. Or, I was very fortunate that I was able to gain trust and credibility among the troops, even among not very nice people. Then I went to the islands. Before I shipped out, I texted my handler that I was going into position and would be out of contact. About a week will have to wait, and within 2 days of the allotted time frame I've outlined, I'll be getting into position. I couldn't run away at once, because I didn't know the whole disposition, what the situation was and so on. First I sorted everything out and prepared myself morally. It's been 6 days since I arrived at the last post that was on the islands. Then I was unescorted directly to the specified location, where I was eventually met by a SWAT team. For 24 hours I went out to the meeting place while avoiding harassment from the people I was with. The situation was as follows. After contacting me, the special services from Ukraine informed me that I could surrender under the program I Want to Live. It turned out that it was a completely different special operation. It was a real hell. A meat grinder, to be exact. They won't say in what positions it worked out and how I did it, but in the end, in 3 groups, I got 4 men out of combat positions first, then 4 more, and later 3 more. They all got there safely. With the handler, he told me, all got out, safe and alive. I can't say what route it was on, as it was not only my company's area of responsibility. Sometimes we went to Kakhovka to buy food, eat, smoke and so on. We were not provided with enough food to live normally. In this time period, from August 13th through August 24th, I took 11 men out of combat positions, thanks to the I Want to Live program.
Yes, that's exactly the information he was telling at the press conference that we had today. He was contacted when he was in the Moscow region and signed a contract at the military enlistment office. From what I understand, they control the information and are clear on who is being drafted, who is being signed. He was providing some information, it doesn't matter what kind, because when he got into position on the islands, it was total chaos. We spoke to him personally, he's just not a public person, so he probably didn't feel comfortable talking, because there were so many who declined. Some of the people who refused, he offered to save themselves. How did you convince them?
That's it.
How did it happen? For example, there are 100 people in positions. Why wasn't everyone offered? Why only a select few?
I was on duty when we were still in Crimea and Russia. Soldiers from other units and companies were also on duty. When I talked to people, I assessed what they were, who went because of money, who went because of criminal prosecution, who were ex-convicts, who was just a fool, and who went for some other reasons, because on the face of it a smart man who made some mistake. Thanks to propaganda, he believed our state and went to war. For me, the main selection factor was that the person had undergone some sort of torture.
Главным фактором отбора было, это если человек прошел какую-то вот пытку.
When we talked to people, there were those who said, I just came from the pit, I was brought in from Storm Z, from the hospital, I was injured, I was forgiven and sent to your unit, to a neighboring unit. It was people who had been through some difficult situation, or those who, in my opinion, were intelligent and were beginning to question what was going on. That this was not a war of liberation, that people were basically suffering here. Many had an epiphany right at the positions. They realized that in fact, everything is a lie, that the army is no longer an army, but some kind of formation that is controlled by intimidation and destruction.
Просто формирование непонятное, которое управляется методом запугивания и уничтожения.
And so on. That is, everything they chose and did was meaningless.
Или какой выбор совершили, был бессмысленный.
The hardest group I convinced was the first one, because they thought I was some kind of traitor or worse.
Потому что они думали, что я вообще какой-то просто предатель или еще что-то такое.
But on the whole, I was able to find words that convinced them. I showed them videos of our soldiers being tortured. And I showed them the channel.
Как пытают наших, как и вот показывал канал.
Tortured?
Yes,
Who tortured them?
mostly military police. There were a lot of Dagestanis among them.
The military police of the military forces of the Russian Federation is a separate story. Just recently there was an interview with a man who was standing at a roadblock and was drafted into the military police. The four of them and their fellow soldiers spent 10 days in a punishment cell without food or water. People came and beat them with batons, sticks and stun guns from morning till evening. And they demanded that they sign documents. They were lucky, because a colonel they knew happened to be passing by, who knew these soldiers. They shouted, "We're here!" And the colonel took them away. Although the soldiers were hidden. That is, the military police is a punitive body.
It's official.
The official torturing authority. For them, getting into the prosecutor's office or the FSB is a blessing. Because if you end up in the military police, you can at best end up with a disability.
Yes. When they were in Kherson and leaving the checkpoints, they changed into normal clothes so they wouldn't be spotted.
Yes, the man from the interview had a broken arm. He says all the military police are hiding from the military because the military is ready to shoot them. They are afraid, they gather in groups, they walk in droves or they drive such cars so that they will not be detected that they are from the military police. Because if a regular military man meets a military police officer in a field somewhere, the other one will be killed. They are absolutely hated by everyone because it resembles the People's Commissariat of Internal Affairs in a very harsh way. But it's very good. I think the details of how he derived them are interesting to everyone. However, no one will tell you that, because it took you 2 days, right?
Yes,
Why did it take so long? What was going on in there?
because when I got to the location and when another shift arrived to replace us, there was this. First, they knew that I was supposedly acquitted, but not quite all the way through. The one who came with the commander came that night to shoot me if I tried to escape. The commander and his men started coming to these islands. First, mortar men without equipment came to replace us. They had the task of occupying the destroyed post and locating the VSU artillery. They just came in with their phones and poking their fingers on the map and trying to point out where the artillery was. During the evacuation, I learned that it turns out that sound is very misdispersed there, and if the artillery seems close, it is actually much farther away. Anyway, my situation is as follows: I spent 3 days deciding to get out of there. First of all, I was scared, because I could be shot, I could be destroyed by Ukrainian mortars, I could be destroyed by drones, because my route was unclear. I only knew the evacuation point. There was no itinerary or escort, because I had no time to contact my handler when I was chased to these islands. And even as we moved out on the route, there were people there in one section. I mean, not people, there were 6 dead. They were wrapped in clothes, in sleeping bags, flies were flying around them, clothes, dry rations and machine guns were scattered everywhere. Nobody cared about any of this. Who saw the movie Purgatory will understand, there was about the same picture. There were corpses lying everywhere, flies were flying around, and the stench was several meters away, but everyone passed by, because everyone had their own tasks, and no one was evacuating the dead from there. Because there was no way to do that, you could have been destroyed trying to get away from there by boat or across open terrain. I mean, if you didn't hide there, you could have been killed or injured, no way around it. I already had to decide whether or not to be, that is, to leave somehow. At 5 o'clock in the morning, on the 2nd of September, I made my decision. I was strongly encouraged to take this step by what I heard. One of them said that the senior lieutenant, who had been tortured for 4 days, was fed up and that the commander had said to get rid of him. How exactly?
Did they want to kill him?
I'm not sure, but probably yes, as they like to say, nullify. And I realized that this was the end. Sooner or later I would have about the same situation. Besides, I didn't understand how they treated me there, what they decided about me. I made my decision the day after they arrived. We were usually up at 5 in the morning. There was a shift due at 5 in the morning. I took advantage of the hustle and bustle of the morning rise and at 5 o'clock swam across the river that ran next to the island. I walked down the bank. It wasn't very high. I sat there for a while. It took me a long time to make up my mind because it was scary. First of all, it was very scary, but as they say, fortes fortuna aduvat. Fortune loves the brave, and I gathered my courage. I knew from the clanking of the machine guns that they were looking for me, and that the search party they had sent after me would run down the path. I started to swim across the river very quietly and very slowly. The sun had not yet risen and it was dark, so I could not be recognized or seen, especially since I was running without any extra weight. I had this camo on, a small bag of food on my back, and I had my first aid kit just in case. So that if I get shot, there's something I can do to save my life. That's all I escaped from those positions with. I swam across the river, got to the shore, water was running off me, but then they heard me and started shouting, "Daniel!" And that's when I got scared. There was a burnt forest on the other bank, all the trees were fallen, and I ran as hard as I could, scratched all my legs, but I reached the swamp. On the swamp I ran somewhere further, ran for 1.5 kilometers through dried reeds, all wet. Then I waited until dawn to warm up. Despite the fact that the river was still warm at that moment, the air was cold, probably 16 degrees. During those 2 days, I don't know, the following happened to me. How to explain it? Is it God's providence, or is it such lucky coincidences?
Совпадения были.
I didn't know how to go to the evacuation point because there was a swamp around, and next to the forest the Kakhovskaya hydroelectric power plant had been blown up.
Каховскую ГЭС взорвали.
Yes.
There are trees piled up there, there are such debris that if you fall in, you probably won't be able to get out because of the debris and reeds.
Камыш.
In general, it is not clear how to get out of there if you fall through.
Вместе с головой уйти, и непонятно, как выбираться.
And while I was drying off, I pondered my plan of action.
Как же я все-таки выберусь?
I've had 4 major lucky breaks that I call that.
Везение, которое я так называю.
The first was when I saw dog or cat tracks. They were through a swamp and I didn't care at that point.
Они проходили через болото.
I figured if a dog or cat passed through there, I'd probably pass through too.
То и я, наверное, пройду.
I followed those dog tracks, and I had an initial plan that if I couldn't make it to the evacuation point, I would go out to the VSU positions.
Если дойти до точки эвакуации, то я выйду на позиции ВСУ.
Supposedly, I thought there was a grain elevator nearby. I thought I would get out there, but I needed to get to the shore and figure out how I could swim across the Dnieper. But to the Dnieper we had to walk another 3 kilometers through all this rubble. I walked first through the swamp, along these tracks, so as not to fall through anywhere. I walked carefully, not a step to the left, not a step to the right. Indeed, almost to the end of the marshes I followed those dog tracks, as if someone had laid out the path beforehand and I was following it.
These are our nanobiological dogs.
Нанособаки биологические,
They were sent out to lay out a route.
чтобы проложить маршрут
Navigator dog.
собачий.
Yeah.
На самом деле я
In fact, I'll say more, I even felt like I was doing the right thing, because at first I was shaking with fear, I was apathetic.
трясло, была апатия.
But then, when I somehow started to get something going, and I got a kind of inspiration, or rather, a second breath.
Вдохновение, воодушевление у меня получилось.
After I reached the shore I shouted,
Дошел до
"Help!"
берега, крикнул «помогите».
No one saw me or heard me. There were only scout drones flying around, which I avoided because if I was spotted, a kamikaze drone or mortar shell would most likely fly towards me.
Или минометка, и меня бы накрыли.
The next bit of luck happened when I realized that I would not be able to swim across the Dnieper from where I came out.
Днепр я не переплыву.
I turned back and slightly to the left and started walking back out to the swamp.
Начал выходить обратно к болоту.
It was the biggest fluke. I didn't have any water with me, no flask or anything.
Ничего такого.
My flask was left on my unloader along with my assault rifle at the positions. I didn't take any grenades or guns with me because I was on my way to surrender as a prisoner.
No armor either?
I couldn't have crossed the river in armor.
Реку не переплыл.
Makes sense.
After that, I found 2 packages of 2 5-liter drums of pure bottled water in the trash.
Литровками бутилированной воды, чистой.
Initially I drew water in the Dnieper. It was dirty, but there was no choice and I drank it.
Я попил этой воды.
I went and found 2 bottles. They were dirty but intact and the water was already tasteless but clean.
Невкусное было, но чистое было.
I took only 1 5-liter bottle with me, and from the other I washed my face, drank water to my heart's content and went on.
И пошел дальше.
Further my route was unclear, because on the map it looked clear, but in fact there everything was blurred.
Там все размыло.
No identifying marks, the forest has been demolished, the swamp is parched, trees fallen.
Деревья.
I needed to find a place where the river thins out to swim to the other side.
Где я смогу переплыть.
Places where I could swim across.
Еще будет.
There were dog tracks in some places and I followed them.
Я по ним шел.
I walked about 3 kilometers and got to this place.
И дошел до
So I was walking for about
где-то, наверное,
6 hours. The reeds had been washed away by the water, and I was walking in the direction the water was coming from.
камыш был
Against the current.
Yeah, against the current.
через завал, я бы не пошел.
I wouldn't have gone through the rubble because I would have gotten stuck there, and when I went through the swamp, the reeds were on my side. It was very hard to clear a path for myself by pushing back the reeds.
Отталкивать. И
And
шел,
so,
наверное,
I was walking at maybe a kilometer and a half an hour.
в час с такой скоростью приблизительно, потому что
You said you walked 3 kilometers in 6 hours.
I mean, that was before the Dnieper, and this is along the Dnieper.
А это вдоль Днепра.
I got it.
Yes. There the swamp was fresher, so to speak.
Там болото было посвежее, скажем так.
The marsh along the Dnieper River was drier.
Таким пересохшим, как вдоль Днепра.
Walking along the Dnieper was easier.
When you left, did you let them know you were coming?
To whom?
To the curator.
Yes.
Нет, я сказал, что
No.
я где-то на позиции.
I told him I was in position somewhere, would be in for 4 days and out for 2 more days.
Дня 2 буду выходить.
I see.
I ended up being 2 days late because I was in position for 6 days.
Я на позициях пробыл 6 дней.
I see.
And so, I reached a certain place, already tired.
Уже устал.
I went on for maybe 3 more kilometers, and then the road got easier.
Дорога.
I stopped near our washed out pontoon bridge because it said Z in Latin.
Потому что там вот эта латиница Z была написана.
I decided that I would make a rest stop here. I thought I might find something interesting.
Интересного.
I found the pallet first.
Поддон.
There's trash washed up with that pontoon bridge.
С этим, как его, поддонным мостом.
There I found 5-liter empty bottles, from which I made floats, found planks.
Из которых
In general, I had a pretty good raft together with a pallet.
был достаточно хороший плот вместе с поддоном.
Because I was tired very strong psychologically and physically, I decided that the next morning I would swim across the Dnieper. Because the current is strong and the water is cool, I did not know how my body would react.
Вода похолоднее, я не знал, как мой организм отреагирует.
I decided that I would stay there, and the next morning I would wake up, eat and, when it was warmer outside, take a raft across the Dnieper.
Через Днепр.
The situation is as follows. The fact that I found this pallet near the pontoon bridge, on which I eventually swam across the Dnieper, my third luck.
Этот поддон, на котором я в итоге переплыл Днепр.
The
fourth major piece of luck was that I found 3 watermelons.
Просто
Watermelons?
Yes, the 3 watermelons that grew next to the trees.
там, рядом с деревьями.
Were they ripe?
Yes, one was small, one was bigger, and one was almost fully mature.
Почти полностью созрел.
Did you eat them?
Yeah, I had enough watermelon for 2 days.
Наелся.
Then I started to swim across the Dnieper. I ate watermelon in the evening and had one of 2 canned stews in the morning.
Получается, я взял 2 тушенки на 2 дня.
Because I couldn't take any more discreetly.
Без палева.
After breakfast it got a little warmer, and at about 11:30 in the morning I started to swim across the Dnieper.
Переплывать Днепр.
I made a flag out of a white curtain, you know the kind with the little holes in it.
Белую, которая такая, значит, дырчатая маленькая.
If a boat came through, I would show it that I was surrendering, that I was not some saboteur sailing across the Dnieper.
Какой-то диверсант там плывет через Днепр.
I was in camouflage, there's no telling what they might think.
I know the people he was taking out had been met. I asked and was told that.
Я спрашивал, мне сказали, их встречали.
So there is a difference between his evacuation and those he was sending. He would warn when a group was leaving and then they would be met.
Говорил, что отправилась группа, и эту группу встречали.
In his own case, he didn't have a definite date, so no one met him.
Поэтому его не встречали.
And accompaniment through certain moments. I swam across the Dnieper for about 20 minutes. I was carried away about a kilometer, maybe 800 meters from the point from which I swam away.
Я выплыл, может, 800 метров.
In general, I was very tired, half of my body drowned in water, swimming breaststroke, only with my legs, and with my hands holding onto the raft.
Руками держался за плот.
What about the bottles?
The water bottle was washed away by the wave.
What are you saying?
I tied the bottles under the bottom.
Под днище.
How?
That's where I found the rope.
Там какая-
There was some kind of tent that was tied to that spot.
Она была привязана там на тех местах.
I was untying ropes from it to use later.
Которые можно было достать.
With these ropes and hoses I found in the trash, I tied the planks together, tying them up so the raft wouldn't disintegrate while I was floating.
Чтобы не распался плот, пока я плыву.
When I made it to shore, I wasn't even resting. My adrenaline was off the charts.
Там адреналин зашкаливал.
I took stock of the situation. Where I swam across, there were steep cliffs on the shore and some fields starting from above. I chose a place where I could climb up. The spot I chose was a little bit of earth, and the next thing to do was to climb up the cliff. Where I went up, the elevation was about 2 or 3 stories high.
About 6 meters?
Yes, it's not very high.
6 meters is a lot.
Let's just say that I once long ago climbed a 3,000-footer in the Sayan Mountains. I had a little experience, meaning I was familiar with rock climbing, so I climbed up the sheer rock face. After that I found a burning field. I won't go into details, but I was lucky. There was a way through a tree. But there was some low visibility barbed wire strung there.
Go through the tree?
No, through the trees.
It's clear.
Yeah, I just didn't see that you could go up there a little more comfortably. But there was a wire. And it must have been a minefield.
Probably assumed you could go up there, right?
That, too.
Ours implied that it was possible to cross there.
And they booby-trapped it. I saw the wire on the ground, and I was lucky I didn't experimentally check to see if there was something there or not.
I see.
I won't go on and describe how I got to the evacuation point because it was already clear where it was. I got to that spot and there I was met by SWAT teams. They were dressed like Rambo.
All of this was accomplished by the Special Operations Forces along with the General Intelligence Directorate. SSO has been involved in this as well. Because, as far as I understand, that section of the front, that's their area of responsibility.
As soon as I came ashore, they met me, and because I was on my way to surrender, I held a homemade flag with the color white in my left hand, and in my right hand I held my ID card. I walked like that the whole way, about 3 kilometers. When they met me, they asked me, "Who are you?" They didn't shoot me, nothing like that. At first, when they met me, they said, "Well done, handsome man."
It's not worth saying any further. Write in the comments. What do you think of all that Daniel has been through? Your mother answered. Does she know? Or doesn't she know?
No, she probably just found out from me.
She asked, "Were you forced?" What's she gonna say?
She may not answer.
Why? We sent a voicemail.
We should write to her again.
What?
We need to send another voicemail. More clearly. I'm worried. I haven't seen her in a while.
When did you see her? June?
Yes.
No.
I last saw her in June.
No answer.
Let me do it.
Okay.
Mom, hi, I'm a prisoner. Nobody forced me. I'll explain everything to you now. If you want to talk to me, you have to give formal consent to the video camera and we'll talk to you here. It's fine, you don't have to answer anything. I mean, I'll tell you my story. You'll see me on YouTube later. I mean, I'm fine and everything will be fine with me. You just answer. It's fine now.
What about your brother?
Yes. My throat was even dry.
Have some water.
Yes.
There will be pruning here, probably because we are drinking water and waiting for a
И
response.
ждем, когда ответят.
What?
Что?
No, don't. What's next?
In what sense?
What do you plan to do next?
Делать дальше.
Even if I could, I don't want to go back to Russia at all.
Я уже, даже если бы мог, я вообще не хочу возвращаться в Россию.
I'm not
пока.
going back as long as Putin's regime is there.
Так.
Since there is a war going on, I was offered to join the RDK, which is the Russian Volunteer Corps.
Добровольческий корпус. Я
I,
буду,
with RDK's help, will probably go through the training,
пройду какое-то обучение, наверное,
and then I will defend Ukraine from attack by Russian troops.
от нападения российских войск.
We have a program running. I couldn't respond for a week. There were problems with that Telegram account where everyone was writing to. Russia blocked that Telegram account.
Рашики его забанили.
Essentially, the program is that we pay rewards to our defenders that add to the prisoner exchange fund.
Нашим защитникам, которые пополняют обменный фонд.
Here the situation is reversed. It turns out that the prisoner of war also added to the exchange fund in the number of 11.
Пополнил обменный фонд в количестве 11 человек.
As far as I know, he passed our military's background checks.
Прошел там проверки у военных.
When he's interviewed, if he's approved, he'll get into RDK.
Подсобеседуют РДК.
If he passes the interview.
Если пройдет собеседование.
I asked and was authorized to pay Daniel the sum of $3,300.
Выплатить сумму, равную $3300 Даниилу.
This is a real unique case, but there have been cases where we've also paid a lot of money and brought in $7,000 each.
Много денег и привозили там и по $7000 были выплаты.
But what's interesting is that he'll spend them on uniforms and clothes and necessities.
Потратит на форму и на одежду и на вещи, которые ему там нужны первой необходимости.
That's why
Поэтому, как бы,
the program
программа
works.
работает.
Here is the equivalent of $3,300.
$3300.
At your exchange rate, it's somewhere around 330,000 Russian rubles.
Где-то 330 тысяч русских рублей.
He'll get dressed, get his shoes, his uniform.
Форму.
If they let me, I'll film the whole thing. It's really going to be very interesting.
То я это еще сниму, это реально будет интересно, это будет прикольно.
Write in the comments, everything, it's got to be fair. He's added to the exchange fund and thanks to our sponsors Cosmobile, the Lacey Foundation, there's money and it's being paid to our defenders.
Фонду Леси есть деньги, и они выплачиваются нашим защитникам.
Doesn't answer for unclear reasons, but when she does, I'll be sure to record the conversation because we'll be together with Daniel for a while yet and record the conversation.
Будем какое-то время вместе с Даниилом и запишем разговор.
What do you think of what's going on? We have an unconventional approach, as you can see.
Стандартный подход у нас, как вы видите.
Who will win this war?
Этой войне.
Of course, Ukraine, because usually whoever has the truth wins.
Затем и победа.
This may sound like a catchphrase, but it's obvious.
Фраза, но тут все очевидно.
We have a tradition when I ask a prisoner of war to address his fellow countrymen, fellow soldiers, whether he should go to war or not.
Своим землякам, сослуживцам, надо идти воевать, не надо идти воевать.
If you
Если
want.
хочешь, если хочешь.
Sure. All those who will hear me, maybe someone knows me as a different person, but in any case, understand one thing, we Russians are wrong.
Человека, но в любом случае поймите одно. Мы, как россияне, мы не правы.
We are in a foreign land, they were a brother nation to us.
Как братский народ,
Ukraine, we are
мы
wrong.
не правы. Мы
We have brought so
только
much
горе.
grief and sorrow. It cannot be described in words how bad it is and just awful.
Это просто ужасно.
We have to stop this war. Each of you can contribute to stopping this war, those who are Russia, those who are at the front.
в остановку этой войны. Те, кто в России, те, кто на фронте.
Most of you have a connection. Please watch this video. Leave positions unarmed. Somewhere it will be unpleasant, somewhere you will be treated humanely, but either way you will save your life. I'm not going to lie here, I went through it myself, it was very scary, but trust me, when the hour of reckoning comes, you will still be wrong. This Putin regime will fall anyway. And the fate of Russia and the whole world depends on how it will fall, who will take power. There are decent people in our country who will lead those who are deceived by propaganda. We must all unite against the authorities, stop being afraid. Because fortune favors the brave.
The program I Want to Live is a state program of voluntary surrender to Ukrainian captivity. For this you can write to the project I Want to Live, fill out a questionnaire through the bot. Next, you will be contacted and given instructions on what to do and how to do it. If there are those who wish to repeat the act, please contact and email me. If there are RF commanders who want to save the lives of their subordinates, contact them, send your soldiers. They would be hidden, no one would know they had been handed over, they would be exchanged like ordinary prisoners of war. They will be in good conditions, they will get medical care, you will get money. You will receive not in hryvnias, but in cryptocurrency to the wallet. In 1 minute I will pay you for each soldier. So there is always a first time for everything. But as history over the last 6 months shows, the military always comes up with interesting things and it works. The end?
Men, I believe in you, you will make the right choice. Russia will be free, Ukraine will win. Goodbye.
Guys, the military allowed us to realize the plan and film Daniel buying his uniform. So it's going to be interesting. We are driving in Kiev along the embankment. On the waterfront. Daniel, ask something.
What's the most popular cab? Uber?
Uber, Ussuriysk. It's not an advertisement, nobody's paying. Uber, Ussuriysk, and what else? I don't know. I use Uber and Ussuriysk cabs. Have you been abroad?
No, never.
No. A church on the water.
Water?
Yes.
How?
There's the Dnieper.
Which I swam across.
The one you were swimming across. So that the front license plate doesn't hit. We're being escorted by the military. It's interesting to talk. By the way, this is the Friendship of People's Arch and the Glass Bridge.
The one that was bombed?
Yeah, but they missed. That's why.
They said money was stolen from the budget when the bridge was built. This is what they are skillfully doing.
One question, do you care what's stolen from you? You've got billions stolen from the army, billions stolen from everywhere, trillions stolen.
Propaganda.
You are discussing how you can destroy a glass bridge that is just made for tourists. It has glass floors. They sent a whole missile there. It was after the Crimean Bridge, and they missed. It's not like they hit him.
Propaganda needs something to show and tell. They'll latch on to anything.
What do you think of the city?
While I'm admiring it, it's beautiful, really beautiful. And the fact that there's graffiti.
Will the Dagestanis secede?
I think so.
I take it they're determined.
They'll probably unite with the English. Probably not with the Chechens, but with the English they can unite and create some kind of state union. When I talked to the older generation there, and they told me that there used to be a brick factory, some other factories, all closed on purpose. So there's no work. A local contract worker told me that.
What's the point of unemployment?
Probably to make Dagestan economically dependent on Russia. For Dagestan to be poor. Is this a balaclava?
It's just a hat.
I think I could use it for the winter. Does that fit?
Yes, Panama is good. Check out the caps.
I don't really like caps.
All right.
Are there any fall options?
Buffs?
What else do we have here? What's that in the front? They're jackets.
This is not needed yet.
I think so, too. Pouches.
It's a hip belt.
It's probably what you put on your armor.
What is it?
It can be used that way, too.
What's going on here?
We're trying on new clothes.
New clothes. MTAC. Allowed it to happen. They provide assistance to the military and will sell us all this stuff at a good discount. Militarist store, in Vladimir. How are the shoes?
These are fine, size 44. Very comfortable.
Go on.
So, all in all, it's fine. Except the jacket's too small for me.
Small jacket?
Yes.
How many sizes smaller is it? Size L. We'll tell them.
This?
What are you wearing? A t-shirt.
Too many clothes, it seems.
All right. Now they're going to size up another jacket and it's okay. Almost final. What about the pants?
Pants, thermal underwear, then.
Have you measured it?
I'll try it on. Then comes the tunic. What's it called?
Ubaks.
And a t-shirt.
I think you should take it off because you're going to sweat. Keep the jersey and tunic or ubukes.
Yes, Ubaks.
Try on your thermal underwear. What about shoes?
Sneakers and half boots.
Have you tried on your sneakers?
No, but they're the same size.
You better wear sneakers so you don't overheat, and bring gloves.
Have you tried on a balaclava?
Have you tried on a balaclava?
No.
Try it.
Okay.
Try it on in front of the mirror.
30. 347.
Friends, we've changed Daniel's clothes. We bought him all his clothes. Thank you Militarist Store, thank you MTAS Company, they gave us a huge discount. They help us, I've applied a couple times and they help the military. It's definitely known. Feelings?
The clothes are super, even though it's a civilian firm. Very good quality, and I was treated normally. Everything was advised on what I needed. Everything was fine.
I mean, it's an unconventional release. I almost said series. This is a proper military man who, like many others, decided to come over to the side of good. They have decided to go to the side of good to serve and defeat the Putin regime because this is the wrong war. It is a wrong war by all concepts and general principles. In fact, it is genocide of the Ukrainian people. Ukraine comes up with creative solutions to such problems and, as you can see, so do such stories. By the way, the store recognized me. We told them that this was a former Russian military officer who would be fighting on our side. However, this did not affect the service in any way. They helped us, advised us. Our program works. We pay remuneration for replenishing the exchange fund of prisoners. An unusual situation is that a serviceman of the Russian Federation has replenished the exchange fund and has himself defected to our side. Subscribe to the channel, put likes. Thanks for watching.